What's up, everybody? This is Mark from SolarGames, and today we have a very special guest. It's Dan the Man, Dan from Maindeck.
Hey everyone.
Um, hey, yeah. So, for those who don't know what's going on, we are actually in part two of a ongoing discussion about Grand Archive. Part of this is just a long-going question that Dan and I both kind of really curious about. Actually, answers from each other. Part of this is also just we're trying to do something to celebrate like the 1 year anniversary of Grand Archive and discuss it and kind of holistically look at the game from a 1 year perspective, where it went, where it's been, where it is now, and where the future is going to be. Um, for part one of the video, we've discussed gameplay and really just what's core about Grand Archive. For this part of the discussion, we're going to be more focused on collectability, the market, and the general like finance aspect of it, just like what you guys normally expect from me. Talk about like why you should buy the card because it probably will be, I don't know, worth something more later or something. But yeah, so without further ado, this is Dan from Maindeck. If you don't know who Dan is, you should go over to his channel. Again, links in the description for links to his channel. But Dan is a big TCG, I guess, creator. He does a lot of content on TCGs in general, not just Grand Archive, but everything. As you can see from the shelf behind there, the things that I recognize are like there's the Commander Black edition, Double Masters, but but Dan knows every card game under the sun. That's how I think about him, probably.
I know an awful lot of them, and I do my best to play everything that comes out at least a game or two. Um, and I have a long history playing a lot of card games. Worked at an LGS for a decade as well. Judged not I was going to say more games than I've played. That's not true, but I've judged a lot of games too. So yeah, I'm really excited about this, Mark, because the one area where I never feel very confident is talking about the financial side of things. Because while I worked at the LGS, I wasn't in charge of making decisions about stocking necessarily, unless I just was really passionate about something. And I certainly wasn't going to try and tell the owner, "Hey, if you buy into this niche card game, you're going to make $1 million." So I am really excited to hear your thoughts. 1 year into Grand Archive, at as you said, the Cotton Eye Joe of the conversation. Where did it come from, and where will it go?
Yeah. Um, well, where did it come from? So, Dan, you may not know a lot, or you think you don't know a lot about card games, but it was actually your interview, and this is before I knew anything about Grand Archive. But it was your interview published on your website that pulled me into this game. Now,
Really?
of course, you know, Foam is the person who like showed me the game at a Magic convention. We played it. At the end, I was like, "This is pretty cool." But I went home and started doing research, right? Because I don't just put money like okay, all the card games I actually put money into, I've done a ton of research, right? So I started doing research on Grand Archive. I saw the Kickstarter page. Too bad I couldn't back it anymore. It was already closed. But I read your interview with Aldius Allen.
Hmm.
This is way back, right? And the part that like really hit home for me was the 50% split between collectability and play race. Right. I've never ever in my life heard a game talk about it. And because most of the games are like very cautious about this whole like financial part of it because they don't want to admit to like essentially printing money or printing lottery tickets, but the reality is they're all just doing it. And it's like this weird open secret about like what they're doing or what they're not doing.
Right.
And somehow like if they just never admit it publicly, then I guess they're not doing it, which I think is dumb, by the way. I think it's just FTC hasn't figured out like whether they want to regulate this in a certain way or not. Is how I think about it. But regardless of that, right? That's a different conversation. But regardless of that, your interview was what pulled me into the game because I was like, wait, hold on. So they actually care about the collectors, which means I'm not going to be like, screwed over if I put a significant amount of money into this card game, right? And then I started thinking, okay, well, is first edition where I put my money? Do I buy singles? Do I buy certain foils? What are CURs? Oh, they're we already have like serialized cards, set
Hmm.
one, right? And then like, well, is that going to be a problem if everything is serialized? Then do I care about serialization at all? Then I saw, wait, they're serialized, but every card is unique, right? The artwork is unique. The signature, sorry,
The
the
signature.
signature is unique on each
Yeah.
one. And I was like, what the like is this possible? There's so much money that goes into doing this, right? So as probably some of you guys know, like I interviewed Roger way back, and one of the things we talked about was the uniqueness of the CURs and how many like printing plates, and these are kind of expensive, you actually have to buy to make this possible. Um, and this is what they're doing to kind of support the game. So from that point on, and then kind of just looking at the general market like stability going forward. Obviously, just like any other card game, I even said like, I remember like in when everyone's super like rosy and like great about like DOA, I made this video where I was like, okay, so I love Grand Archive, but I'm waiting for the Fallen Empires of Grand Archive. I'm waiting for the first crash where they like
Mm.
screw something up. This happened to Flesh and Blood. This happened like every card game. Doesn't matter what card game, right?
Yep.
This happened in Pokemon. This happened in like Magic Gathering. This happens in Yu-Gi-Oh. This happened in Flesh. Every card game had this, and so I was like, I know everyone's really like hype about this thing. I'm just waiting. When is this going to happen? It happened pretty quickly, right? So
Mhm.
FTC happened, and like a lot of people were very angry. Stores were angry. People were angry. I think I was a little bit angry too. I was like, wait a minute, like, how do we think seeding this in a box was not going to be manipulated by people who were like, oh, I just open the box until I hit my CUR or CSR and then sell the rest, right? And so the fix was also really fast, right? And so this is where I think if you're a collector, if you are somebody who's really looking at the game and looking at the longevity, the future of the game, like the fact that this company recognized the problem, created a fix for it, and created a fix where it's kind of like very low cost to them, but it's like high reward for the players. And of course, like people were discussing, oh, are they going to do the redemptions every set? Hell no. There's no way they're doing redemptions every set, right? So do not expect that at all. This was a temporary fix for a problem, and because if it's either fix it now or there might not be a card game come set three, right? So I think like part of this too is just that's the kind of like response I like to see from a company, and being open about like their mistakes, being open about like, hey, how we're going to address that is really really cool. So yeah, that's honestly like where we are now. And of course you see the crescendo up again, right? So with ALC release, people are very excited. Now there's going to be of course a little bit of uncertainty. People are wavering about MRC because MRC feels like FTC again, right? And there are differences here, right? So double the card pool definitely helps. The fact that it has a CUR definitely helps. And so I think history is not set on this one yet, and I think it will be a lot better than what other people were expecting. And the thing about MRC too is like really depends on the print run. So part two of why FTC crash is not just that it's like if essentially mappable, but it's because there was the full inventory of what FTC was meant to fuel, which is today, but also the future of this card game for the next, let's say, 5 years, was unleashed on the market at the same time. And that is another problem because, I mean, it's a small card game, but they're building for the 5 year future. But we all had to buy up the inventory, whatever. So it feels like, oh, there's too many cards. But like, it's funny because I was like throwing away a bunch of bulk commons from FTC, and I'm just like, I really hope somebody in the future is like, they don't need a fast cure or something, or a raccoon,
Yeah.
and like I threw it all away or something stupid like that. Yeah. So
It's a bold move to throw away the FTC bulk commons. I admit I'm holding on to them too because
yeah.
it's just yeah. I mean, I would say that from my absolutely amateur analysis, the thing that I thought was maybe the most damaging. Actually, I don't at all disagree that the locked in CURs making the boxes mappable
hmm
was an issue,
hmm
but it was kind of this confluence of larger case size to make that viable, to
Yeah.
just to enable that in the first place, with a smaller set size, with that entire print run being released at once, which meant that everybody who's invested in the game and wanted to try and pull one or
Yeah.
whatever was buying a massive amount of product
Yeah.
right away, and then didn't need most of it because the
Yeah.
set size was too small, but the cases they had to buy to guarantee it were huge.
Yeah.
You'd buy a case, you got almost two play sets of most things,
Yep.
and that was just to get one, one CSR,
Yeah.
and that just led to a flood of
Cards.
excess product on the secondary market, which then tanked the prices of everything, which then tanked the box prices.
Yeah.
Um, and it just felt like it was like a perfect storm of issues. So I agree. We don't know what's going to happen with MRC yet, but all of those points were addressed. In the next set, it's a larger set without the guaranteed CSRs. Um, I think the case size is it's
6.
using the FTCs. It's the
I think it's doing 6 actually.
it is going back to 6. Okay, and
Well,
so
okay,
that
maybe don't quote me on that. I
I
feel like now that I
I feel
said
like I
it,
should know that, and I
now that
am
I said
blanking
it,
right now.
yeah, I feel like that's right. But yeah,
But I think that's being dealt with, which should make it a lot more resilient to
yeah,
anything like that, from happening again. I also think that Weaves the Shore, if there's one thing we've learned about them so far in our 1 year with them kind of actually actively publishing the game with cards in people's hands,
yeah,
it's that they are always willing to attempt to learn from a mistake,
yeah,
and respond, like you said, very rapidly. So
yeah,
the other side of things was, you said, was they just released everything at once. Well, that's not always a requirement in the TCG industry. You can print a lot, but you don't have to have it all released on the market at once.
yeah,
You then have to. I'm certain there's a bunch of costs for like warehousing and stuff that you
yep,
have to take into account
yeah,
in doing that.
yeah,
But that can manage the values of your product quite a bit as well.
yeah,
So I'm hoping that if they have done the same thing where they did one print run just like FTC,
yeah.
that they've at least managed to like stagger it or something in waves as well.
Yeah. I think part of that too is a lot of this stems from design. And it's kind of crazy because if you think about it, what's happening at the factory has to match what's happening over in Texas, where the cards are actually being made. And because, if, for example, if you're given a set of 90 cards, there's no way you can fit it into a DOA box and make it make sense at the factory.
Yeah.
Like it has to be a smaller box size to signify that it's an expansion set, essentially, not a main set. All this other pieces. Um, and then that incurs the changes of the factory because, like, I mean, essentially you have to have two different boxes if you're gonna, let's pretend you don't even print what you're planning for the next 5 year, and you do something that other card games do, which is like you say, I can reprint this for the next 2 to 3 years. Well, the problem with that is, you have to hold all the material because
Yeah.
otherwise your material cost kind of varies, right? So you want to buy a lot of material up front. But then where are you going to put it? Because the next set you're printing has different boxes. You can't just print the same artwork on. Like, it's not even the same size box. Um, the machines to pack and do all this stuff is different. You're going to have to hold your plates where all the actual cards are printed, like 2 sets, 3 sets of them, the wrappers, everything, right? So it gets really tricky when you think about it from a logistic perspective, like how a company has to, like if they're big, right? And Weeps is super small as a company, and they're just starting out. But if they're super big, you can have different facilities. Like, okay, you're dedicated to printing like small boxes. You're dedicated to printing like double decks or whatever, like starter decks. Like, but this is just one factory, so as much as you can simplify the product line, that helps. So I think in the future, if a lot of them become more of the like standard box size, 6 boxes in a box, six booster boxes in a case, um, it makes it easier for options like, oh, we're going to do a reprint, a second run, essentially, to kind of like help the market if like Carter keeps going up in price or something, like that. Yeah,
Yeah. Carter is
Carter,
what
it's
a
so
card.
expensive right now.
Oh my god. I'll be honest too. Like I had never even really considered the manufacturing materials
Yeah,
perspective of that as well. Like it's really easy from my perspective. You're focused on gameplay and everything. It's really easy
yeah,
to take for granted. Just think, well, just print it again. Just print it again.
yeah. It's
It's like,
instantly show up to LGS, right? Like they ran out, call Weeps, they print it, and it's there.
yeah, it just shows up. But there
Yeah,
are so many layers that we don't have to think about, that
yeah,
they take care of, and
yeah,
handle for us. And then on the flip side, then when we think something is easy to fix, we don't really understand the full depth
Yeah.
sometimes of what it means to actually solve that. And let alone things like, well, you can't just call up the printer and say, fire up the printers, here's another,
Yeah.
there turns out they have to be constantly printing things for not just Weebs, but for other companies, typically
Correct.
to stay in business, because
Yes.
that they need to make money and
That's right.
everything. So
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so it's always going to be churning out different products, and you might have to line up, right? Your
yep.
reprint, and then there's also the cost. Like if you print 40,000 boxes versus 10,000 four times, they're not the same cost,
No.
right? So because the printers don't know you're going to do another three batches, you're not like ordering that ahead of time, so it's tricky. One thing that's like really interesting about the crash of FTC, if you will, was I think it actually did a very good thing for the GA collectible community. So, as you've probably seen with every card game that's on a Kickstarter recently, right? Um, there's a rush of a certain type of people that come into a market when it's Kickstarter because they know, right, on release there will not be enough product. Um, People are going to really want it, so there's a lot of like opportunity to go and like 6, 10, 20x your money instantly, right? And part of the problem with FTC, I would say, is actually caused by this group of people
Hmm.
because they were buying up a lot of DOA. It gave the wrong signals to stores, which gave the wrong signal to like distribution, which gave the wrong signal to Weebs. So, like, if I was running a company, I'm like, oh, well, this is how well DOA sold. Well, I got to print this much for FTC, right? Because all the stores are ordering FTC at this level because the stores are like, I need more boxes, and DOA sold so well, I'll buy the second set. Essentially, that was a like misjudgment because a lot of this was like market manipulation, essentially, and that's a problem, right? But with FTC, a lot of the people who were doing this kind of stuff got kind of cleaned out because they probably bought like cases after cases, and the price tanked 20, 30,
Sure.
40%, right? And
Sure.
so you gotta like, are you gonna sell? You gotta hold? What are you doing? And so essentially, I think what happened is after that, of course, cards are very cheap, available for all players. Great. You can buy a Merlin for $3. Awesome. Like I was a little bit afraid Merlin being like SR. I was like, is this card gonna be like $10, $20 for a champion you need to play? That's crazy. But it being very accessible is great. It allowed the players to have the cards, and then it allowed like who people who were really into the card game to like be in the card game. In fact, when everyone was dumping FTC, I bought so much FTC.
Yeah. That was a
I
good
bought
time.
I bought so much FTC. It was insane. Like every time I see like some $35 FTC, I'm like, I'll take 47 boxes. Go next. Like who
Yeah.
else, right? It's just like a bunch of them kind of came into my inventory at that time because I was like, there's nothing wrong with the game. People were just really scared. And cool. Like honestly, if you're this, I don't know, like, you know, scared of like market fluctuations, then maybe this is not the right like market for you in general.
I think FTC really induced some severe market corrections.
Yes.
I think it's really astute to point out the impact on specifically the consumers at the time, because yeah, like every Kickstarter TCG, every single one has had this the pump and dump players more or less, who are in there just trying to like make a buck
Yeah.
on the hype, and
Hmm.
then call it a day. And it almost is funny to think about FTC as like, it certainly wasn't planned to be this way, but it would be awfully funny if it
Yeah.
were planned to kick certain actors out of the market and
Drain the
focus back
swamp.
on the players.
That's crazy. Yeah. Like what a weird like sixth dimensional chess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Move here. Like oh we're gonna clean out clean out the player base or collectible base. Yeah.
Uh,
Um, I mean, you probably remember when like Flesh and Blood, first edition, Welcome to Wraith went to like $9,000, right? Remember
yeah.
those days?
Yep.
I actually was one of the first like backers of. I bought a bunch of Flesh and Blood from Rudy. I maxed out like my allocation for Flesh and Blood, but I didn't see it, so I sold out pretty early because I was like, this game sucks. I was
Ouch.
playing a brute, and I didn't know how I was working. I was like, the only playable here champion in this whole thing is like Dorinthia or like Katsu. Like brutes suck, right? And then like don't even get me started on Garlean. They're total trash, right? Of course, like me not knowing anything about the game and really like thinking about it into it. So I was like, this game's not really that great. So I kind of sold out. But
Well, Flesh and
yeah,
Blood was a tricky game though, at the
it's
time
different.
because it's not. I don't mean gameplay wise. I mean
Mm,
to have any idea where that game was headed. I was at our LGS when the mail arrived. That was the like, hey, this we're Legend Story Studios. We want to send you our game. Do you want to try it? And I still remember that that particular LGS owner's reaction to that, which was, I don't want this garbage game that nobody's gonna buy called Flesh and Blood. It sounds gross. Nobody wants this, like, whatever. And he declined to get the free stuff from them to try the game out. Um Nobody could tell right away what was happening with that game. And it, I don't think it was the wrong decision that you made at the time. Only
mhm.
in retrospect was it the wrong decision, I think.
Yeah, I think my general, like, again, this is like a younger me when I was just starting out. I saw the stability, and this is the thing. Like this happens to every single person, and that's how you build the discipline. Like the funny thing is, we talk about like, oh, every card game has a crash moment. Every serious collector, somebody who's going to put a lot of money into any card game, also has that crash moment where you
Mhm.
learn these valuable lessons and then you move forward, right? So, Flesh and Blood, I think I have a binder. I think it's the binder where I have my most expensive Magic cards. In there is my Flesh and Blood box label that I cut out of my like 1E box that I crack. I rage opened because I was like, I need to hit like a cloak, right? A Fendro cloak or
A tunic,
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, the tunic, or I forgot whatever the super mythic rare was from for the first set in cold foil, and I didn't. So, but like it was like, like if I didn't get that card, all this is like for naught, right?
Yep.
But it's dumb, and because I think as a younger self, making certain decisions like it was just like really stupid because it's like, oh, the market's going down. Oh, I'm panicking. I'm checking like prices every day. Why are these like mythic rares like or mystical cards like going down in price, right? It's so stupid. So I think like in a similar way, bringing this back to Grand Archive, and really any card game, like if you're going to be in it for the long run, think about whether the card game's like fun for you. Because like the way I think about Magic nowadays, and probably earlier we were chatting off air about this a little bit too, like that double master, right? Cool, you made a good bet. That set is worth a lot of money. Can't say that for a lot of Magic card sets, right? But you didn't buy that set and keep it on the shelf because you're like, this is going to make me a lot of money, right? You did it because you like the game and you think that set is fun to play.
Yep.
And I think that's how you have to judge every single thing. Like I have 1E boxes. Honestly, if Grand Archive like goes to shit one day and it's like worth zero, cool. I crack my boxes. I go try to find my CURs. I sleeve up the CURs, put it in a binder, and it like makes me happy every single time I look at one of these cards. Awesome. That's it. Like it, or right, or we try to like draft it again, and maybe we'll just throw more packs in it or whatever. Like there's still a play side of it too. So
Yep.
you have to be okay with like the things that you love potentially going to zero. And if you can visualize it, and if you can say, hey, that's okay, and it doesn't matter this amount of money I've put into the card game, if it goes to zero, I'm still okay. That is the stable mentality you can have in a card game, right? And then beyond that is like you're just gonna try to make like the best decisions when you can, and then like maybe diversify or something. Like like I personally, right? Like I love Grand Archive. I do have a lot of money in Grand Archive, but I don't have all my money in Grand Archive because that would be dumb, right? I still like just recently I bought another like large collection and then got one of my like favorite cards from Magic. So now I have a Gwendolyn. This by the way
Nice.
is like is the Square Live collab of Magic or whatever, right? Like it's a very risque card.
Yeah.
I'm sure Magic is like we don't want that kind of artwork anymore. But you have these cards now, like and that card. Let's say Magic goes to shit in 10 years. I look at the card, I'm like, cool, but I have a Gwendolyn DeCourcy. It's awesome.
Yep.
This is the card. There's a lot of history behind it. I know the guy who I bought it from, like that kind of things. These things stay with you and they're valuable for that purpose. And if you're okay with like it going to zero, now you're in the right collector mindset to spend actually pretty legit money on an actual collection. Yeah.
Have you ever heard of a card game called Metacross or Meta X, Mark?
No, I
Yeah.
have not.
That's my I'm okay if it goes to shit game.
Has it gone to shit already?
Oh yeah, it died a long time ago. I actually I developed for it.
Okay.
And it was there was a lot of passion behind it from the developer, from the designer and the people developing. and not a lot from the company.
Yeah.
And that's what this Justice League box back here is.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I really enjoy my cards. I really
Yeah.
enjoy my collection. I enjoy the decks that I built. So sometimes I'll just pull them out, look through them.
Yeah.
I go, these are so cool. Like I have a deck that's red and black lanterns for people who are DC fans. I have a deck that's Attack on Titans,
Hmm.
plus Bane from
Hmm.
Batman.
Batman.
That,
Okay.
that's my deck. It's Titans and Bane, and
Okay.
it's really, or what was it, Bane? Whatever. It doesn't matter.
Sure.
It was some Batman villain. I can't remember now. Who
Yeah.
cares? um, but it's those are my decks, and they just make me happy to look at.
Yeah.
Even though I should not have spent as much as I did opening packs for that game.
I mean, look, the thing is, like, if in the moment you enjoy it, that's the value of it, right? And then
Yeah,
beyond that, like, hey, like, and the funny thing is, I'm saying this on my channel where it's like all about finance and all about like, hey, let's try to make the best decision we can make. But I think if you like a card game and you really like the card game and you're willing to spend a good amount of money on it, there's probably a good reason why. And other people are probably doing the same thing. And if other people are doing the same thing, the card game won't die and the cards will have value, right? So like trust in your own decision there. Um, the and the thing is like, look, we like honestly, like when you said Metacross, I was like, is he making a MetaZoo joke? And I'm just not
oh no,
understanding this. Yeah. So
this
like
is before MetaZoo.
yeah, okay, for sure. But like, think about MetaZoo and the thing is like even today, right? The people who are really devastated about MetaZoo are the people who are just in it only for the money. I still talk to people who love the game, who still think it's kind of fun to play, and they're still going to play with their kids, regardless of whether the company exists or not,
Yeah,
right? And who knows? Maybe in like 10 years, this thing becomes a thing again because everyone's like, I want to play Nightfall, and I can't play MetaZoo Nightfall. Who has boxes? Well, I have them. How much? A lot of money, like right,
yeah,
kind of thing. So who knows? So even for a dead card game, it doesn't mean it's dead forever. Like
yeah.
another card game I really liked way back in the day is Shadow Era.
Mm, sure.
Maybe have you heard of it? Have you played
I've
it?
heard of it. I never played that one, but
Okay.
I know of it.
Yeah. So in a similar way to Grand Archive, the mana is a card you have to sacrifice, but it is a permanent sacrifice. So I thought it was a very intuitive or innovative mana system way back, and because this was before Hearthstone, like Shadow Era was one of the first like mobile TCGs I've played in my life, and I was like,
Yeah,
what the heck? This is crazy. And it has that hero fantasy. You play as a main champion that gains like one spell power every turn, and after a certain amount of spell power, you can use your ultimate, very close like to a planeswalker in Magic. Um, and then but it's like also class fantasy because like if you play, let's say a evil, like what they call it, like shadow warrior, you can play shadow cards, you can play warrior cards, you can play shadow warrior cards, but you can't play like cleric cards, you can't play light warrior cards. So it had this like, it's just like similar to like Grand Archive where it benefits you to be in that class and you start playing like your own armors and things that would be available to you. The reason why the paper game died, by the way, is because it's really not designed for paper. The tracking is a nightmare in paper because damage does not clear at the end of the turn. You gain life, you lose life, they stick. And so like I'm playing this game with my friend and I have like 1,000 counters on the table and we have no clue what's going on anymore. And that's a big problem. And that's why the card game died. But I think the digital client is still going. And I have a bunch of sealed boxes in my like garage. And the funny thing is, I still love the artwork. The artwork of Shadow Era is still really, really good. If you like that old school, like gritty, and we don't care about like sexy girls, like um, type of thing, that card game has all those kind of artwork. So yeah,
sure.
yeah. But
Yeah, I think everyone who's played TCGs for a long time has some game that they're like, yeah, they're ride or die for, and it died for them. I was curious, Mark,
yeah,
just on the topic of all these different TCGs and Kickstarter games and everything.
yeah,
Um, so I've said this in a couple of our podcasts on our channel, and everything, but I've always felt that for over the last year, it's been sort of proven that Grand Archive, I feel like, is doing something that most other Kickstarter TCGs haven't been able to do.
Hmm.
yet, which is, again, from this financial side and judging success and everything by that, is they have been they've successfully transitioned from a crowdfunding system
Yeah.
to a traditional distribution system,
Yeah.
which was a big goal of theirs, which they made clear on the Kickstarter is what they wanted
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah.
Um, and they have done that without over leveraging the company, keeping things small, keeping things contained, and outside of the FTC thing, um, have managed to sort of keep printing at the correct level, putting out the right amount of product to keep prices fairly stable on things, and
Right.
also appear to be on a growth trajectory right now. Um, and that's been my analysis of it. And my analysis also is that there are few to no Kickstarter games other than Grand Archive that have achieved that. So I guess first of all, do you agree, disagree, and do you want to talk about why you think that's the case?
Yeah, I think the only thing I can think of that did achieve it, but it burned out was MetaZoo, right?
Yep.
Um, Obviously because MetaZoo kind of came out of the gate really hot, and so a lot of stores pick it up. It was, for all intents purpose, a card game that most stores could recognize, so they were willing to kind of run it. But beyond that, like obviously MetaZoo has its own problems. So absolutely, Grand
MetaZoo's
Archives.
over leveraged too, right? Like
Yeah,
super over leveraged.
yeah,
They got a
they had
huge
their own.
infusion of cash, and then I don't think they knew what to do with it.
Yeah, and also they made stupid collabs.
Yep.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but beyond that, like I think yes, you're right. Grand Archive is one of the like better transitions, I guess, for from a Kickstarter model to a like LGS distribution model. And I think the reason why that's really successful is because the team is pretty serious about the game and pretty serious about running like tournaments. If you look at any other card game that came out of like the Kickstarter era, everyone knows what you should be doing. GPs, like you have store championship, nationals, regionals that funnel up to some sort of worlds type of competition. But most games can't get the player representation for something like that. They can't like get event organization at this level quickly within the first year. So I think Grand Archive setting up with that model, showing the stores that they're pretty serious, have they basically essentially got a bunch of players to go to LGS and say, "Do you have Grand Archive?" And I mean, what better way for a store owner to say to carry a game than to say keep hearing from people who are asking for the game, right? And so, and then you have a bunch of the community member. The other part that's really crazy about Grand Archive is the community is insane. I mean, up here in NorCal, um, Sherry, who's like running a lot of the community stuff, like literally, she basically single handedly like spawns stores. So she'll go to a store, tell them how like the whole model works, and then it's like, do you want to run events? We can help you with event kits, blah 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 blah, and then sets them up. And this is before she's part of like TM32. She's just doing it because she's passionate, right? um but we have like TOs for every store here that all kind of started because they're somehow engaged with the Grand Archive or really like it. So that helps alleviate a lot of the pressure from the store to learn the game, to figure out how to run events, to even have somebody available to run events, etc. So that helps the players have a place to play. Again, more players means more like, hey, LGS carry the game. Third thing is also just stability of the product, right? Like consistent release schedules, so people are like know what to expect. Your product's going to deliver event kits that come with like actually you know um, um, organized play. It's not just like here, like have organized play. It's like here's how we're going to support you on that. Here's starter decks. Here's event kits. Here's like prize support. Here's the like demo decks, right? All these things. So that helps a ton. Yeah. So all these pieces, it's like Grand Archive came out of the gate showing a lot of LGSs. They're very mature. Like they knew what they're doing, and they had all the right like things that LGS would look for in a more, I guess, like non Kickstarter game, right? So the trust structure was built. And also early on, like I mean, in America, we essentially have only I think one distributor that really carries Grand Archive, maybe two, but like that's a good sign, right? So all of what happened from there is as distributors are like looking at each other and saying, "Oh, how's that game selling? If it's selling well, they're going to start wanting to carry it too," and then that
I,
helps. with Oklahoma.
Actually, so Southern was the major GA carrier,
Yeah,
and I know that I heard at some point it was because someone fairly high up in Southern was like was into GA and
yeah,
thought like they thought, there's something here,
cool.
like we all thought,
Yeah, awesome.
and kind of campaigned to get the distributor to like get on board, and it's like spearheaded a lot of what they were doing working with Weebs.
Yeah,
Um, and I believe just a month or two ago, GTS jumped on, which is a big one. To get on as well, which is it's good to hear. It's what you want to
yeah,
hear, right? Is
yeah,
these distributors, like you said, seeing what's going on, going, oh, you know what? I should get
yeah.
a piece of that.
It's been a year, right? And the crowd again, like I said earlier, the clearing out of certain type of people who would purchase J is not necessarily bad because what distribution doesn't want is like products that like sell really well and then sell nothing. They
Yep.
want consistency. And so that's all they want because consistency means they can import like 10,000 boxes, right? 20,000 boxes. I don't want to import 20,000 boxes not knowing if this is going to be the super hot one or the dud, right? So, yeah, and then on the benefit of like, on the Grand Archive side, dude, who's going to run promotion for you? To the people who are going to go sell your product from the front line. It's the distribution. They're going to tell stores about the game.
Yep.
And because distribution is now involved, it makes it more serious than that letter that's coming from LSS. Do you want to try my game? Right? It's like distributor who's like, hey, I'm selling this game over that region. They're doing super well. Do you guys want to try it? That's a lot more trust because they've been like, they're in the business right together. Like we've been selling you Magic, but I'm telling you, you got to try this game. Like Joe Bob from new LGS of Grand Archive. So that helps a lot too.
Yeah, it's very different coming from the distributor who is it is their whole thing to
Yeah.
try and make the best decisions possible.
Yeah.
When they call you and they say, "Hey, we're getting this game in. Do you want it?" The fact that they even made the choice to get that game in,
Yeah.
you know, already means something.
Absolutely. And then you look at like something um like like sorcery, right? Is there something inherently wrong with sorcery as a game? Um I think the gameplay is lacking personally. I think it is different in that it's similar to like, Flesh and Blood is going to appeal to a certain audience, but maybe it's more like my personal take is like if I could sum up sorcery in one sorcerer's gameplay in one sentence is I think it's more of a board game, less of a
Yep,
card game.
totally.
Yeah.
I feel exactly the same way.
Yeah, and but the problem with sorcery is like I mean the owner said I'm going to release one set every year if I feel like it. What LGS is
Yep.
going to carry this product? Like you can imagine, like you carry the product, you go hard on this game, right? You run events, you do all the right things, and the guy says, you know what? I don't really feel like releasing the second set. You guys kind of have to wait another 2 months. And then what happens when the player base dies? Because poor management, right? So like, what LGS would want to run this card game, and that's why that transition is really tough. And then you
Uh,
look at something like Alter. Sorry, go ahead. You had something to say about sorcery.
I don't want to totally derail it and make it a sorcery conversation, but
Yeah,
the other problem that you have is then you do a second set, a reprint, a beta edition, and you sell a single run allocated a very small number to stores and then the rest to Team Covenant. And then the only way you can get sorcery is through Team Covenant at that point, which I mean, I consider that one of the best business moves for Team Covenant that they could have made, in
yeah,
that they guarantee that as long as there's interest, it'll sell through them at whatever price they want.
yeah.
But I that seemed to me like, from the Eric's Curiosa side, the sorcery publishers, one of the most short-sighted decisions
It's
that
dumb.
you could have made.
I mean, just look across the street. What happened to Flesh and Blood 2 years ago? Was they made an exclusive deal with CFB,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And look what happened. Literally, 1E was killed. First edition was killed forever, and I would say a big part of it was because of this, right?
Yep.
This weird exclusivity thing where half the allocation was given to one company,
And
no matter
then
how big.
how are you supposed to grow when
Yeah,
people can't learn about the game at the LGS? But go on, you're gonna
yeah.
talk about Altered, which I certainly can talk about a lot too.
Oh, yeah. Then I want to hear your thoughts because Alter I looked into a little bit, but I haven't really looked into a lot. But one thing I thought about was like, is Alter really a card game? If I was running LGS, I wouldn't carry Alter, right? Because I'm like the logistics of so I'm also going to speak about Altered, assuming our audience know like what I'm about to talk about. So maybe I should intro a little bit. Altered TCG is another Kickstarter TCG. It seems like it's the Kickstarter is doing very well. It has done really well.
It is the most funded Kickstarter TCG of all time.
Correct.
Yeah.
I have problems with it simply because I mean I think it's funded really well because it's very consumer friendly. Essentially, you own like kind of NFT cards and that you can reprint them anytime you want. Like it's kind of like since I have the card, I can just say demand an on-demand reprint of the card for X amount of money. Like it's really cheap, right? You're just paying for ink and paper at that point. Um, but the problem is like that pressure to have those cards on hand is given to each LGS. Like we live in a physical world, but you're literally trying to link the two together. And like, imagine if I'm running LGS, why would I carry Alter? I probably wouldn't sell a lot of product because you can get the product anywhere else. You're trading digitally, so I'm no longer part of the singles game. And then like when the players need cards, they're gonna come to me and ask me to print them out cards for really cheap, basically at cost. I'm making like let's say a penny per card. I'm why would I want to do this? So to me, that model, right, will never go to the LGS probably if the owner's pretty smart, unless they change something about it. But I think it may be too late to change it because it's kind of like the core reason why people are backing it. So yeah, what do you think about Altered?
Uh, so I definitely don't want to turn our Grand Archive anniversary video into the
Altered
altered.
Kickstarter video,
um,
nice.
yeah, I would absolutely love, Mark, if you'd like to in the future. I'd love to join you again and talk more about it too. Altered has and just so people know too, coming from where I am, I have worked directly with Equinox, the company, on several occasions, and I was invited to their Kickstarter launch, and they flew me out to Paris to
Ooh,
celebrate with people.
ooh, nice.
Um, so I like to be transparent about everything here before I jump into it. I think Altered is its business model is I don't disagree at all. It's a weird model and it's hard to judge how an LGS can take the same advantage of it because it's so very different than normal TCGs. But I think also there are a number of things about the game that are misunderstood, or at least not, if not misunderstood, are not, it's nuanced as to why those are more or less effective than people might think they are at just kind of a first brush. The first thing I like to correct people on is I think you said it's like NFTs, and it is not a blockchain technology and not
Yes.
NFTs.
Yeah,
And
I only said it in the sense like you own the digital
yep.
copy of it, which you can infinitely manifest in the real world, right? Effectively,
And I
as long as you
figured
own
you
it.
understood that, but I
Well,
wasn't positive the
I'm
audience
not
was.
even
So
sure if I 100% understand it because I did not do intense research on Alter. To
yeah.
be fair, yeah.
So from an LGS perspective, there are number one things that they're working into the app to make it LGS friendly. There are aspects of the digital marketplace that are very LGS friendly, in ways that people don't immediately think of, and
Yeah.
there are aspects to the product itself on the shelf that are LGS friendly.
Okay.
Um, so again, I'm going to go this briefly just so that we can, but I'm
Do it.
happy to come on any other time.
Yeah.
Um, the on the product on the shelf contains unique cards. Literally, you look at a box on the shelf, there are somewhere between 3 and 5 cards inside that box that you have never seen before in your life.
Hmm.
Every single box you look at, that one has 5 unique cards, that one has four
That's right.
unique cards. You don't know the number, but like the
Yeah.
point is that the way the game works, again, we'd save for another thing, but the point is there are cards that I
Yeah.
literally have altered cards sitting right next to me. Actually, I
Yeah.
can just hold one up.
Do you have one of
There
those unique cards with unique stats and drops on there?
Yeah, yeah.
There you
So
go.
I no, I don't have any uniques because this is actually a paper copy from Paris. But
Okay.
you'll have a card that has stats and effect on it, and the unique version of this card will have altered these. That see the name? It have altered these in some way so that this card does some very different thing than any other version of the card. Um, your deck can only include 3 unique cards in it, so everybody's going to have a different collection of cards that only they have access to. You'll digitally scan it. Nobody else can play that unique version of that card in a tournament
Hmm.
except the person who digitally owns it.
Who owns it?
Um,
Yeah.
that
Mm.
means that when you go to the shelf on the LGS and you're thinking about what product to buy, um, Altered has a unique thing where it has this allure of, well, I could find the best card ever for my deck if I buy that box that
Yeah.
might be in there.
Yeah.
Um, it might not, also, obviously, or there might be cards that are like side grades or sideboard options or
Hmm.
something. But the LGS has product that people can get boxes anywhere else, but they don't contain the same cards. It's like just on a fundamental level, every place you buy will have cards that are different than anywhere else. It's just a
Mm.
small number of them, but I
Hmm.
think there's a psychological impact that's kind of important there to think about too.
Maybe there's
Uh,
like the weird like LGS touring thing too. Like I want to go hit up every LGS in town if I'm
yeah,
here to just
I
see if they like. Can you pre-scan the box to see what's inside the box, or
nope, you'd have no idea.
you have to? So it is still random, right?
It is random,
Okay,
but what I
cool.
suspect is that some interesting sort of conspiracies or player rituals will develop where I think like
Mm.
you think about this game is going to be sold in French and German and other
Hmm.
stuff.
Hmm.
Now,
Hmm.
those cards can be acquired by anyone in the world and printed in the language of your choice. That's a benefit of the digital ownership system.
Yeah, yeah.
So, what happens when someone opens a really good card, a green faction card in the French box? And do people, I wonder if people start going like, I wonder if the French packs have the really good Muna cards, the green faction, right? And like, it'll be
I see.
random,
I see what you're saying.
but
I see what you're saying.
like,
Okay.
there's
Okay.
players get that way. Mark, you know how many people over the years have said, well, the fat packs have better boxes, they have better packs. Sorry, the fat packs
Pre-release
have better
kits.
packs.
Pre-release kits, right?
Pre-release
They
kits
say
have
that
better
they
packs.
just random conspiracy things like this. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. Yeah,
They say stuff like that all the time.
but it's true.
Um, but it's true, 100%. um, so I think that'll be an interesting side of things. Now,
Yeah.
from the digital marketplace perspective, an LGS owner, I'm going to say right now, the big hurdle is going to be acquiring new stock from people because with access to the digital marketplace, anyone can sell their collection at more easy
Yeah.
than anything else. Because all
Yeah.
you do is I take my card,
Yeah.
I already added to my collection with the QR code, so it's in the digital collection. I just go click sell, and then
Yep.
I click the price that I want to sell it at. It's supposed to work somewhat like TCG Player,
Yeah.
so I just list it for sale.
Yeah.
When it sells, what do I have to do, Mark? Nothing.
Nothing.
I got the money.
You got the
Yep.
money. I got the card. Easy.
Yep.
Yeah.
No shipping,
No
nothing like
shipping.
that.
Yep. No
So
risk. No like fakes. No. Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly.
which is really cool from an LGS perspective. Now, um, when I if I'm an LGS owner who opens a bunch of product, I have a couple options, just like I do with every other game. I
Yeah.
can sell it online.
Yeah.
I can sell it in store. I can do a combination of the two.
Hmm.
When I sell it online, my overhead is nothing
Hmm.
compared to every other game.
Hmm.
I don't have to ship anything. I
Hmm.
don't have to worry about my reputation on the marketplace.
Hmm.
I just can dump
Yeah.
everything that I want to online. In store, I can sell it in store, but why would players buy in store when they can buy online and then use the print feature to print everything? Well, the print thing still costs extra money and still costs extra time. LGS owners who open the product will have the product available right there for you. And if they sell digitally copies of the cards but hold on to the print ones because they're not going to ship them, they can have the print ones available for people who then buy digitally somewhere else. So,
Mm-hmm.
Mark, I can buy this copy. If I need a second copy of this for my deck, I can just go buy it digitally, then walk over to my LGS and be like, do you have a copy of this? And they can go, yeah, here's, yeah, 50 cents, a buck, whatever. You can have it right now. You don't have to have it printed.
Hmm.
So there is an additional revenue stream that they open up where they can actually sell it digitally and sell it
Sell it
physically,
again. Okay.
you know, or they can take those extra cards and they can give them out to players. And if they want to, they can be like, hey, want to try the game? Here's a demo deck. It's real cards. You can't use it in a tournament, but you can if you just pop on the app and buy everything in the deck.
Hmm.
Now so it's like a demo. Have you ever like
Got it.
we have it, but it's like a video game demo where it's like,
Yeah.
here's the full game.
Yeah.
You can buy it or you can buy it to unlock the full game, but you can just play this
Yeah.
trial as much as you want
You've
first.
separated the two worlds, the digital and the physical world, basically.
Yep.
Essentially, every card you open, there's two copies of it, kind of.
Yep.
And they kind of link back together a little bit, but they also can be just completely separate. And
Yeah.
that, okay, interesting. It's a different aspect I have not considered. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And there are some other minor things, such
Yeah.
as they're giving some benefits to LGSs in the app where they have better rates when they're selling. So there's
Yeah.
a slight advantage to being a brick and mortar owner
Okay.
on the LGS and
Like
on the app and everything.
a fee structure, you mean? What do you
Yeah,
mean
the
by
fee
better
structure
rates? Okay,
exactly.
got
So
it.
the LGSs pay smaller fees on
Okay.
selling cards
Okay.
to help their margins and stuff like that. So and there will
Mhm,
be other things. There will be other things
mhm,
built in because they're actively working to support the LGS. But anyway,
mhm.
sorry, that's you got me talking about it. But
Well,
that's
I
the
mean, the thing is, you know what I'm thinking now? I'm not really gonna, like, buy Altered TCG cards, but I do like this model, and I think this model makes a lot of money, so I'm like, "Well, are they a publicly traded company? Or are they
yes.
taking private funds?"
It's
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That's I
That's
mean,
the things I'm thinking about now too. It's like,
our
honestly,
LGS
you can
owner,
be
who's
mm,
a Grand Archive fan, huge like super like our LGS owner is such a Grand Archive fan. He was fifth place at Ascent Houston's Path of Silver. Um,
okay. Nice.
and I told him about Altered, and I kind of explained that we talked about these
Yeah,
opportunities, and he
yeah, yeah.
thought, I think a bunch of LGS owners are going to not be interested in this idea. And to me, to him, that sounds like an opportunity.
Yeah, agreed,
So
agreed,
there you go.
yeah. But good segue. Look at you. Path of Silver. I'm actually
Yes.
really curious, right? So very similarly, right? I think Altered and Grand Archive are doing something that's very unique, that's outside of gameplay. So we talk about uniqueness in gameplay with things like Flesh and Blood, but uniqueness outside of gameplay. Never have I seen a card game that rewards collectability, that rewards you for being a whale, essentially, right?
Yeah.
And but it's also it's not just like I have all the CURs. It's more like, can you piece it together into a collection with bonuses? It's more fun than just that, right?
Yeah.
Um, so what do you think about Path of Silver with respect to collectability? And like, do you think overall that's a good idea? Should every card game do something like that?
I don't think every card game should because then it removes something really unique from Grand Archive that I really
Sure.
like. But I think if they were wanted to tap into this player base better, then they would start working on something like this.
Yeah.
So I think it's something they should do. I just don't want them to do it. I
Yeah.
guess. Um, I think it works particularly for Grand Archive because Grand Archive had a focus on collectors from the
Yeah.
start.
Hmm.
And is deliberately making decisions about the collectability of its foils, the scarcity of its foils,
Yeah.
um, the decision to maintain a first edition, ultra edition structure, the decision to print high rarity foil versions, textured foil collector versions
Yeah.
of cards. All of those things play into this system that makes it, I think, work out as well as it does. Um, the feedback from Ascent Houston that I heard from again people who were directly involved in performing well in Path of Silver
Yeah.
um, was that it was a great event, and we actually immediately put in our competitive Discord channels for Path of Silver for next time, so that everyone could work together on it as well because everyone
Mm,
was just excited.
yeah.
Um, it is a I thought it was an extremely novel system from the very start,
Yeah.
and now that it's being built into Omnidex, which by the way is um, in the running, if not the best tournament software that's actually available for card
Yes.
games right now too.
Yes. Oh, we could just check it from our phone. It's so amazing, right?
Yeah,
Like, which table am I? Boom, right there.
it's an incredible software, and building in the Path of Silver features too is only going to make that side of things more smooth, more polished, more professional.
Agreed.
Um, it's a I think it's a one of the most clever innovations in card games that I've seen in a while, and it's such a subtle and kind of simple thing to do. It just the thing that I thought was the real innovation here that people aren't really giving the credit that's due is that the index features stats for cards
Yeah.
that aren't printed on the card,
Yeah.
which allows this to function and allows it to be something that just can exist on the side for the game.
Yep.
Um, that then because it has Omnidex integration now,
Yep.
it all just it works really smoothly. It's almost again like Altered having sort of a digital and physical side,
Yeah.
and it's actually kind of right to think about those two things together because this is a way that Grand Archive is a different way of doing it, but
Yeah.
it's a similar sort of integration.
Yeah. You know what I saw when I first saw those stats on the index?
What?
I I swear I don't know why it flashed for me. It was like, what if Grand Archive had like like a video game,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And these look like they look like the power graphs that like a lot of Japanese game would have, like attack, defense, like agility and mobility, armor, whatever, right? HP. Like it felt like that. And like
Weaves the short.
characters.
They came from developing gotcha game. A lot of the team was involved in
Okay.
developing a gotcha game prior to this, but then decided that they actually sold. I believe they sold the game off to another company,
Hmm.
and then said, "What we really want to do now that we have a little bit of capital is make a TCG.
Is to make a paper gotcha game.
You make a paper gotcha game."
Nice.
And then yeah,
Nice.
but I mean that honestly, I think a lot of people aren't familiar with that background, and that
Yeah,
background is what I think provides context to a lot of the decisions
I think so. Yeah.
that they've made, and their focus on apps that are functional and useful, and uh it's what's really remarkable to me is how well that
Hmm.
transition seems to have worked with a good team who
Yeah.
has a good head on their shoulders, because it's almost like I look at this thing and go, well, maybe all of the TCG companies should start by making a gotcha game and like
You
cut their
learn a
teeth
lot.
on that, and then they can maybe figure out how to approach a game with the kind of consistency that you need to
Yeah.
have a successful gotcha game.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I think the last main thing I want to ask, and I think this is one of the reasons why we have even a collectability side of any card game, is to essentially make cards more available for players who want to play, right? And at a price point that's more accessible. I have seen some talks recently about how Grand Archive is getting kind of expensive to play, especially the meta decks.
Yeah.
So, how do you think and what do you think about that topic? And do you think that's like working? Is there things that like Weebs can do to improve that element? Like the whole idea was like collectors are going to open a bunch of boxes. They care about the CSRs. They sell everything else back into the market. Everything's great. So why is it not working? Right?
Yeah, there are so this is the old slash really hot right now game pieces versus collectibles discussion. Um,
Yeah.
game to me, from my perspective, game pieces are the priority,
Hmm.
and that's where I approach things from. Not everybody approaches it from that angle, and
Yep.
that's totally cool. But for me, I'm a player first and foremost. I want people to play the game, and so I value game pieces
Hmm.
over other things. Now, that doesn't mean I value print a set into the ground until Ghosts of Pendragon is $3 or something. I certainly don't think that's the option.
Hmm.
That is the most effective. Um, but I see a few routes that would all be, I think, a successful way of getting game piece availability to be controlled, um, without completely destroying the value of products. Because, like, at the end of the day, you open a box, you have an EV that you need to kind of hit.
Yeah.
Um, it
Yeah.
shouldn't be consistent, but it should be it shouldn't be terrible odds either, right? Of getting at least like your return back in value, with the chance of going higher or lower, because life isn't fun if it doesn't ever go lower. You got to keep it
EV.
exciting.
Yeah.
Um, so one thing that I think is important to consider is that there is a design and development part of this that can address the issue. Um, decks can be created over time that are at a similar power level to effective decks of the past, which don't then directly devalue a card, by printing more copies of it, but by producing more options for people to play in the metagame.
Yeah.
It becomes less required that people have certain cards in order to or at least I should say feel like they need to have certain cards in order to keep up.
Yeah.
So, for example, if we have warrior options in the future that are using Umbra, that are using Neos, that are using other Crux cards, even potentially, I don't know if you'd ever actually take Ghost of Pendragon out of your deck, but
Hmm.
um, when more options exist in the metagame in general, then cards become less ubiquitously
Yeah.
needed, and then the price usually adjusts accordingly.
Yeah.
Um, the collector angle is what maintains value during that kind of transition.
Hmm.
Um, and will then, potentially fight back a little bit on that. But there's some impact that how development flows will have on the pricing of those cards.
Yeah.
So I think they need to keep that in mind. But I think the other option to manage the sort of game piece and collectability is the direct reprint option,
Yeah.
in targeted products
Hmm.
with alternate artwork changes to the card
Sure.
in some way.
Sure. Yeah.
You want to maintain the prestige of the original print,
Hmm.
but you want to, I mean, I think Ghost of Pendragon should not be a $30 card. I think it should be like a $10 card.
Hmm.
I think that's where it feels good because that card is powerful. I don't think anyone would feel bad paying $10 for that
Hmm.
effect.
Hmm.
Um, but uh, I think it's okay if you want to spend $20, $25, get the original print
Hmm.
because it's
The
cool.
artwork is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like filling out your deck type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's, that would be the healthiest place from a gameplay perspective for
Hmm.
it to be, while still kind of keeping the prices from totally tanking and ruining the value
Yeah.
for the people who have been, you know,
Yeah.
relying on that.
Yeah. Um, my perspective is slightly different about
Okay.
this. Yeah. Um, so something I've been really thinking about since when Gildas went to like $50 or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Was like what happened? Obviously, Gildas became more popular when allies became more popular. So this is the meta shift that you're talking about. So had you bought Gildas earlier, you're fine, right? You already had them, so who cares? You already had your playset or whatever. Um, same thing happened to Arthur. A lot of the other cards from DOA, but like look across, there's other cards still in DOA that are very unexplored. Lancelot,
Yeah.
Intangible Geist, like talk about some of the other cards in that like other paths. You know, like could those cards one day become the $20-$30 card? Absolutely, right?
Hmm.
But I also think, so it will always shift, right? So you basically the money you spent into insoles now come out of Spirit Blade insole and maybe go to something else, right? Um, so you're always going to be having like an ebb and flow in the market, and because a lot of times you are chasing meta, and for a lot of people who don't like me don't have the time or smartness to go build like actually a new deck, change the meta, if you will. Um, I'm going to be changing the meta, so that's kind of like where you're going to have to put your money. But also the other thing also to kind of think about is the market adjusts much slower than the player base, right? One big tournament, let's say we go to Worlds, right? One big tournament where somebody shows off a new meta, it's going to change the market like instantaneously. The market can't handle like 1,000 players buying 4 copies each of a card. It just cannot handle that, right? And so essentially, what happens, like, look, either you have your full play set and you're just going to sit there and you're okay no matter where the meta is going to go, or you don't have it and then you have to go ebb and flow. But as money goes into certain cards like Gildas, people like me are like, we have a bunch of sealed boxes, and I'm like, wait a minute, there's a problem. The EV is inverted, meaning normally a sealed box should be worth more than the contents of the box, EV wise, right?
Hmm.
But if it's inverted, meaning like I'm almost guaranteed money opening a box, the boxes are going to be open. So naturally, the market will adjust even if the meta doesn't change. Like imagine if Gildas is still very popular over time, and you're seeing this already, like that some of those ally cards are coming down again. Why? Because people like me looked at the price and said, just open more boxes. But that takes time because it actually physically takes time for me to go open the boxes, right? To potentially buy more boxes off the market, etc. To kind of just get the card flow into the market. So I think a lot of ways it is working, right? So let's say, imagine if I don't play the game at all, and all I care about is collectability and essentially like finance. I look at this situation, I'm like, well, cool, open more DOA. I'll keep opening DOA and keep selling the singles until that inverted EV is no longer in my favor. Then I stop. And what I've done is I've essentially fed that player base the cards they need, and I'm good to go, right? And beyond that, of course, I stop because it doesn't make sense for me to open boxes at loss, right? So I think the market does balance. Unfortunately, though, it's like earlier we were talking about this whole like foresight and future. Some players don't have the patience to see it, right? So yes, of course, Gildas goes up in price. No one could have accounted for that. But long term, within just even a month or two, it will be adjusted. So kind of like fear not. I see the same thing happen in Carter, but I also know there's a ton of ALC boxes unopened. So
Yep.
I'm thinking like, why don't people just open more boxes? Really?
Yep. I think yeah, I mean I don't disagree at all with that. And that is definitely something that should happen. I know for ALC our store is now cleaned out, and I think it might be out at distribution as well.
Hmm.
Um
Hmm.
so it we may be getting to the point where the altar needs to get printed at some point.
Hmm. Sure.
But I think what you're saying is absolutely not wrong. I do think there's a point where the player base grows past uh the the retailer's ability to supply that
Yeah.
player base
Yeah.
with the cards that they need without absolutely overstocking everything else that you have, because you're selling all your Gildases, but how are your Lancelots doing? Right? It's like, um, at some point, it's that issue that I remember from the LGS of
Yeah.
they issue they put out starter decks, and it's a pack that comes with you know three different starter decks, three
Yeah.
copies of each, but you have to
Yeah.
buy each one, but only one of them is good. Um,
So you just that's right. You have all the Sylvie decks. You're just kind of pulling up.
Yeah, and that I mean that is I think that is a factor that has to be taken into account
Yeah.
as well, because at some point, and I'm not saying right away like, well, Gilda's $50, better they better print it in the next starter deck or something. That's certainly not what I'm advocating for, but
Mhm.
I'm just cognizant of the fact that at some point, as the game continues to grow,
Yeah.
um, the retailers might just lose their power in really addressing that without taking L's on their own end anyway.
But I think it's also a simple fix. I mean, Magic has shown us how you do this. Core sets, Flesh and Blood did it
Yep.
literally with historical sets.
Yep.
You just take the cards that people need, and then you reprint them. And
Yep.
if you care about the collectability of it, like what you're saying, print them in different artwork, or like the way that I think like James at like LSS thinks about it, is like print the ugliest
The white
looking
border.
version. Yeah,
Yep.
and keep making it uglier. Like next set, we're gonna print it in like I don't know gold. It's like gonna scratch off super easily. So
Yep.
cool, right? Like whatever, right? Just keep going worse and worse. And so yeah, you have the cards, you can play them, but it's not the 1E version. It's not the like even the ultra version or whatever, unlimited version. So
Yep.
I think there's a lot of avenues for that. And kind of speaking, I remember that conversation. I think it was like Mitch Picklesore, me, and Solidar one day about ALC and discovering like how like the 1E actually works in ALC and how the foils don't say 1E on them and all this like stuff. And I think one comment I just remember Solidar saying was like, what if we don't do alter the way that you think alter is going to be done? I.e., what if we don't do it the way that DOA was done? And I was like, And even DOA, right? Like Asen wasn't part of like 1E. I don't. There's a couple cards. I think Frost Paladin wasn't part of
Frostborn
1E.
Paladin,
Yeah.
Bestial
So there's
Frenzy.
exactly there's
I could name them,
cards.
but
Yeah. But what if Alter Alchemical Revolution was drastically different from Alchemical Revolution?
yeah,
What happens to the set? It's a really interesting aspect. But then I was like, why do you even call it alchemical? Just call it like something else, right? Like revisit to this like dimension or something, right?
Alchemical Revolution,
Sure, right? Or like
Revolution.
correct, or like alchemical revolution, the aftermath, right? Like
Yeah. Oh
the
no, we don't name sets aftermath. Mark, come on, you know
that's
that.
right. That's right. I forgot. But yeah, like something like that could happen too, right? So and the game is so new. We have four sets, right? Pretty soon we're gonna have four. We have three right now. Who knows? And even now, like as we can see, the creators are learning from everything that's happening and they're adjusting kind of on the fly. And so who knows? In 2 or 3 years, the game could be in a very different spot. Maybe Grand Archive also gets away with the 1E stuff that like a lot of companies started with and then just decided that wasn't right for them. Who knows? So that might be the actual final solution that works out for the game.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that. I missed that
Yeah.
conversation. I'm curious to see what may or may not happen
Yeah.
with an Ultra Edition
It
too.
was a big conversation because I think that was the first time maybe as you know how Mitch does a bunch of the like kind of like posters that describe what's going to happen in certain sets. They were building the posters. They were asking some clarification questions, and that's when I think a lot of this came out about like how the foils were being handled. And of course, I mean, the thing is like I keep a very close pulse on the collectors because that's kind of the people I care about. And I was watching how the reaction was on that thread, and I was thinking like, wow, this is like something that I didn't even think was a big enough deal was a huge deal to collectors. And you can just imagine like how that, I mean, we talk about the benefit of having two armies of people who love your game is you're going to have two revenue streams that care about two different things. The downside is you could lose half easily because you played towards one but you didn't care about the other, right?
Yep.
So it's tricky. That balancing, walking that tightrope, it's not easy at all. So
Yeah, it's you know, we've so far we've seen Grand Archive make very good decisions. I
yes.
think they've done a brilliant job so far.
Hmm.
But uh, it's not an enviable position to be in.
Yeah.
But when they succeed, you know, it's one of these. I mean, I see it from a perspective of just like, you know, someone who would look at any business that I'm just trying to gauge. You know, do these are these guys going to get anywhere? And
Hmm.
what I see Weaves of the Shore doing is taking the hard but rewarding route
Yeah.
rather than sort of the easy slam dunk, but you know, low reward ultimately
Yeah.
route.
Yeah.
And I think history tends to favor the risk takers, right?
Hmm. Hmm. or or
Eventually.
or the consistent people, right?
Yeah.
Who are just like it's not about like one and done. It's about like consistently making the right choices, even if they're small, even if they give you minimal rewards, because your future, that larger goal is where you're going towards. It's not about like just getting that like money today. So yeah,
Yep.
I agree. Yeah. Long conversation. Thank you so much, Dan. Was there anything I should ask you about this, or you want to hear from me before we cut it off for today?
No, I mean, I think I definitely talked enough, especially about games that aren't Grand Archive in our
Yes.
anniversary conversation. But
Yeah.
um, Mark, it was a pleasure, and especially hearing your perspective on things that are not typically the area that I focus on. It's really
Mm.
great to hear that. I'm glad you have a wonderful community here who are tuned in and learning important things from your videos. Or I suppose you're sometimes all learning together as well, as
Yeah.
that's how I
We're
feel on my
we're all
channel
trying to
too.
figure things out. It's
Yeah.
everything is it's always in flux, but that's why we're in this, right? It's fun because it has tension. Haha. I learned
Yeah,
something
oh,
today.
there, a little callback, callback.
That's
Speaking of
right.
which, if
Yeah.
anyone started on this video, definitely head over to Maindeck if you get a chance and check out Mark and I chatting about the gameplay and
Yeah.
everything Grand Archive. I promise we don't talk about Altered in that one. That was just here.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I feel like Altered is going to be a financial topic for the next year or so, as we kind of see how that works. But yes, absolutely. Yeah. So again, yes, part one of this video is actually on Dan's channel on the main deck channel. So again, links in the description here on this video. But otherwise, well, Dan, I had a great time. This is a blast. Thank you so much for indulging me talking about finances, even if you're not super comfortable doing it.
No, I hope
It's
to do it again
it's fun.
sometime. Actually, it's still fun.
Absolutely.
I learned so much from you, so it's great.
Cool. Thank you so much. All right. That's gonna do it for us. It's Mark and Dan. We'll see you next time. Stay classy.
Stay classy.